Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Dalmar, together with my co-host Mark Lawrence of Statewide News Service, jbiztechphilly.com, and now, as you can see, columnist for the Jewish Press.
Right, I'm having really a lot of fun doing all of those things, and it's just, writing about how the Jewish community, how the government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. And one of the issues in terms of government relating to the Jewish community is cemeteries. And we have two very special guests with us today from the New York State Association of Cemeteries, Dave Fleming and Dan Hallenbeck. So welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you for having us.
And we have a somber topic, but I'm sure we'll still
liven it
up a little.
We'll do our best.
Okay. So, Dave, I just want to ask you, tell us about your organization. Tell us about what goes on in, what you have to do and what your membership is, and.
Well, actually, I'll let Dan tell you, if you don't mind, a little bit about the organization itself. Dan acts as the executive director of the association, and I do the government relations work as well as consulting for the association.
Okay.
Yeah, our organization is made up of all different types of cemeteries. We're a non-for-profit association. We make up non-for-profit cemeteries, religious cemeteries, veteran cemeteries, and some standalone crematories that were grandfathered in under the law, which David will speak about. Our real goal and mission is to serve the communities that these cemeteries are within, provide assistance in any way possible. Our membership is over 600 members. Some of those consist of cemeteries, and others are businesses that act within the industry that support
Is that funeral directors, or that's not under your auspices?
No.
It's just the cemeteries themselves, not the
Yes.
funeral
Correct.
directors. All right. There's 600 cemeteries in New York State?
There's much more than that. We have 600 members. There's a New York State Division of Cemeteries, which is the regulatory authority for all non-for-profit cemeteries, and they are the regulatory authority for all.
There are profit cemeteries?
No, actually, under New York law, all cemeteries are required to be not-for-profit.
All right.
So
why
there
the
are currently
distinction?
just under 1,800 regulated cemeteries in the state of New York. There are almost 6,000 cemeteries in total, and those would include religious as well as private and family cemeteries.
So why the distinction to always say non-profit cemeteries?
Well,
Is that
actually-
redundant, or?
Well, no, I guess it's not. We try to make it, when we say nonprofit cemeteries, we're really talking about the regulated nonprofit cemeteries. All cemeteries in New York are nonprofit, but
You said private cemeteries. It's interesting. I was taking my kids on a trip, and we saw, and it's not New York State, but I saw something in Maine also. Maybe you tell me more. 100 years ago, maybe it's 150 years ago, a person had 10 acres, 20 acres, and they just put a little cemetery plot, almost as big as a normal room with a little fence
Well, we
around
see
it.
that on the Northway,
Yeah,
around
that's what
exit
I'm
5,
saying.
yeah,
That's
they
what I
got
said
that
on
little.
the trip. So would it be considered cemetery to you? Or,
well, that would be under the 6,000 cemeteries that are in New
even
York.
a little
Yes.
family
Even the
plot
little
of
family
10,
plots,
15.
absolutely.
Could you tell us what this fund is for destroyed monuments that the Bureau of Cemeteries has, and how to access it, and what do you have to do to be eligible for the money that's in there, and maybe how much it's in there, I don't know.
Well, that's a good point. We wish there was all of the money that should be in it, but like any other fund that's controlled by the state of New York, it gets swept on an annual basis. So there should be about $9 to $12 million in the fund. Right now, they fund it at upwards of nearly $1 million a year, 900,000 this year, 900,000 plus.
So
to cover
10% of what it should
what
be.
was contributed and is now gone. That's been absorbed into the general fund for decades.
Wow.
Yes.
That's upsetting, I presume.
It's very upsetting. We actually had a bill in that would require that the money be protected, and was unfortunately vetoed in a previous administration.
Now, one of your advocates in the Senate is Mike Rasenhofer. It seems like all cemetery bills go through Mike Rasenhofer. Why is he so special, and why is he taking such a care for your bills?
Well, he's been a tremendous advocate for
Yeah.
the association. That's clear, really for all cemeteries. But he's chairman of the Corporations Committee, and under the way the Senate is set up and the Assembly as well, all bills relating to cemeteries have to go through the corporations committee. So he's the chair of the committee that principally hears those bills.
But there are other members, I mean.
There are other members who do sponsor bills, but
No, I spoke to him about it. He seems to take pride in.
he really does.
And he is Jewish also, so.
He's a tremendous advocate of cemeteries of all types, and he respects what our folks do and you know who they are in the community. Obviously, these are, as nonprofits, they're made up of the board members all through the community. So whether they be, you know, teachers or, you know, your next door neighbor.
Do you have an advocate as staunch as Senator Rasenhofer on the Assembly side? Is there a go-to
Yes.
person on the Assembly side
Yes.
that's Mr. or Ms. Cemeteries? Or?
Assemblyman Brennan's been a real advocate for cemetery legislation.
He must have some of the largest cemeteries in his district, or no?
He does, actually. He lives across the
Washington's-
street from Greenwood Cemetery.
Greenwood,
I guess.
okay.
His district office is across the street from Greenwood. So he's got great open space right in his front yard.
That's it. But they also have a Washington Cemetery is on McDonald Avenue, and it's separated by the L.
Yes.
That goes
Yeah.
on over McDonald Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Is that primarily a Jewish cemetery, Washington Cemetery, or?
That I couldn't answer.
Because I have relatives buried there, but we can't find them. We don't know where they are, and they have really bad record keeping there.
Well, if you know who they are, we'd be happy to try to work something out to help you out
You know,
with that.
Mark, once you talk about Jewish cemeteries, I just wanted to, around the Jewish view, that, you know, we were like a little bit joking that cemeteries is obviously a morbid, you know, subject or a business, but in Judaism it's called Chevra Kadisha, which means it's the holy society. So it's not like, oh, you know, like cemetery people, ooh, dead bodies, get rid of them. But it's actually a very holy, you know, it was known to be an honor in the Jewish community, part of the burial society, because obviously you should take care of somebody when they're alive, that goes without question, but even when they passed away, they're not just a heap of muscle and bones and just get rid of them. They're treated with the highest level of respect. So, I mean, on one hand, the Jewish, you know, burying someone is very special, but you know, just talking to funeral directors, of course, you know, part of being a rabbi is obviously is, you know, burials also, cemetery work. And they say more and more people are just getting cremated.
Yeah,
You
well,
know.
I was going to ask you about the crematories, because it seems like that's, you're not, in the Jewish religion, I guess you're not supposed to be cremated, but yet they have Jewish crematories. Do you have any comment, any thought about what's going on in the industry regarding?
Well, I would say that, you know, generally, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I think cremation rates statewide are 60%. They're 60, you know, are in places 60% of all deaths are
Really,
you know,
that
resulted
high? I didn't even know
in
it's
certain
that
parts of the
high.
state, particularly in Western New York. There are pockets within the state. So, you know, with a cremation rate that high, there's certainly a change in the perception of, you know, how funerals are conducted and how services are conducted. And we're certainly seeing that in how people memorialize their loved ones who are no longer with them. And unfortunately, I think in some instances, we have folks who take a very disposable view of people. And, you know, cremation is an easy route. For others, it's a choice and involves memorialization. And certainly in a lot of cemeteries that we represent, they have all sorts of options for memorialization and respect of their
Well,
departed.
one way I understand is just also it's expense. So it goes the other way. I mean, you know, listen, if something costs, it costs. You know, I mean, that's life. You know, if you have to, you have to. But, you know, the cemetery fees, you know, again, I'm a rabbi, so I deal with all kinds of people, and some people just don't have funds. And really, funerals cost a lot of money nowadays.
They don't
You know,
have
so
to,
I
though.
don't-
So-
They don't have to.
They don't have to.
Why?
And, well, because you can choose more affordable alternatives for memorialization. You don't have to get the same casket that President Reagan was buried in. You don't
No,
have to.
but we have very, pine box, we
Sure.
have holes on the bottom, we have a very simple
Absolutely.
type of a casket in the Jewish religion, so how much cheaper can you
Well, but I
get?
think from the perspective of the Jewish faith, there's plenty of affordable options, you know, for choices in where you decide to go for the funeral part itself, where the funeral director is involved. And the cemeteries many times are, you know, associated with a synagogue, so therefore you have a specific cost. And that cost really relates directly, in most instances, to the care and upkeep of the cemetery. So you have to be able to have enough money put aside to continue the operation.
Well,
of the
no, I don't
cemetery.
think anyone would be refused burial in a synagogue cemetery. I also, but there was a gentleman in my synagogue who did say you have to pay to lay. That was his, he was the cemetery's chairman, that was his phrase, and, but anyhow.
Costs money to die.
Yeah, you know, it does, it's about $10,000, right?
Well, it depends.
For simple?
It depends. Well, the prices are all over.
Well, what's the least expensive you've heard of?
I can tell you, I actually operate 3 small rural cemeteries in Rensselaer County.
Oh.
And they're not obviously religious cemeteries, they're not associated with the temple or anything, but they are municipal cemeteries. And our graves go for $600.
For the
So,
grave, but
for the
then you
grave.
got the casket cost and you
Sure.
have other costs.
Those
so-
are costs outside the realm of the cemetery, though, so.
But that's why I'm saying, as an association director, let's say, I mean, you must be totaling these things up, and you must get a feel. I mean, this is your field, so you must get a feel for what it costs for someone to get buried.
Well, to go back on your comment about cremation, it is a concern to many cemeteries, and a lot of our outreach and calls that we receive are cemeteries that are looking for ideas to decrease the cost of burials to help offset some of the people that are going to cremation and not memorializing. So some of the ideas that cemeteries have thought of are things like walking trails within their cemeteries. Other cemeteries have thought of things like a small fee to allow you to walk your dog through their cemetery. They've had community fundraisers that help offset some of the costs to maintain the cemetery, which as a result can decrease the cost for burials. On the other side of casket costs and things that are related with the funeral director, that's sort of out of our control per se, as us controlling their prices.
I'm not saying you control it, I'm just saying you understand better than someone who's never been through a
absolutely.
funeral, how
Absolutely.
much, I mean, we can get the head of the Funeral Directors Association on also, but I'm just saying that you do get a feel for how much a casket and that part of it, even though it's out of your realm, how much that part of it could cost, and that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, well, again, getting back to what I was saying earlier, there is such a difference depending on what part of the state you're in and even what part of the capital region you are in. Where I live in Rensselaer County is going to be a lot cheaper than if you come into Albany County. The prices that you're paying a funeral director, are a cost. So it's a market price.
Right.
So you're paying that price.
So is there a law that says you have to be buried in a casket?
No, you don't even have to be embalmed in New York.
So you could just
You can skip a lot of this stuff.
You could
Absolutely.
just dig a hole, put the person in, cover it over, and
Well,
that's
you
it.
couldn't personally, but a funeral director could have that arranged for you. In New York, you're required to have a funeral director
But those,
supervise.
like we said, those
Oh.
family plots, a person has 100 acres, they could make their own little cemetery.
They can make their own
They
cemetery.
really? They're
They
allowed to?
absolutely
How do
can,
you like that?
although I caution against it frequently when I speak at events where folks are learning more about cemetery law and how to manage a cemetery, because I think part of what our membership does and what a synagogue cemetery would do is about memorialization, and it's about perpetual memorialization. And without proper funding, you see those places on the sides of the Northway that become abandoned and run down, and no one's maintaining them. We're required to have trust funds and required to maintain. Why a cemetery in New York is different than other states is that we are a perpetual not-for-profit. We have to be around forever. And there's a requirement that we have to
That's
provide
interesting
funding.
because this is very important because I just had a case like that. But I mean, Mark and I both know there's a cemetery around in Bethlehem where I live, and it's for 100 years old, and it is totally run down. And then someone, what I said was personally, they were scared because the synagogue temple was older population. They said, I want perpetual. I'm burying my mother. I hate to think in 20, 30 years when all the members they're all senior citizens and there's no one to take care of it, it's going to be run down. Oh no, we have a perpetual fund with the Jewish Federation.
This is Congregation Beth Emeth, and they have a cemetery now, an active cemetery in Loudonville.
Right.
And this was their, like Rabbi Simon was saying, for like 100 years, but it hasn't been used in 50 years. And I already called them, and they said they know that there's a problem in the cemetery in terms of water and seepage into the graves and culvert. So is there something that maybe they could apply to the Division of Cemeteries, or is there some way that the synagogue could, you know, get some money or some help in terms of a backhoe or something to try to make this right? That's what I'm thinking.
Well, you know, there's a municipal assistance law that was passed just a few years ago that allows cemeteries to go to municipalities and seek their help. And municipalities can provide in-kind goods or services to assist cemeteries. Issues like drainage and so forth are something that would be of an interest to a municipality to be able to help. It's an easy fix. They don't have to write you a check to do it. They can actually provide the goods and services. And so we encourage folks to do that because it's an easy thing. In this the age of a tax cap where municipalities don't have a lot of money to be able to provide financial assistance, they can provide the assistance that they already have available. If they have a little downtime with their highway crew, they might be able to do something.
Mow the lawn, you mean?
Absolutely. There are plenty of municipalities that do that now that have decided instead of taking over a cemetery, they're going to help with the mowing of the lawn. They're going to do the books for the cemetery.
Now on Long Island, the cemeteries are not owned by synagogues. They're like Wellwood and Montefiore, and I mean they're societies
Sure.
that have bought plots within this humongous acreage of land before Long Island was developed. And have you been down to these cemeteries?
Yeah, there's some real problems with societies that have aged out. I think that is a concern because, you know, you touched on an interesting point about perpetual care in the societies themselves, in that the societies are separate from the cemetery as a whole. So while the cemetery may be very well maintained, some of these society burial grounds are not because the cemetery doesn't actually own the land. They're not allowed to go on them.
Right.
So we've been looking at legislation that would help clean up the administrative nature of those societies.
Because I belong to the Knights of Pythias, and they have a burial for me. I have a family plot, which is Montefiore Cemetery, which I have burial there, and I have Beth Abraham Jacob. I could be buried up here.
So you've got all the bases
I'm not
covered.
sure, I'm not sure where I want to be buried, but I know I got 3 good choices.
Right. Sure.
So, but that's what people join. That's why people join these fraternal orders, because they had burial rights, and and people who are unaffiliated with synagogues, and they just wanted a place to be buried. And if you became a life member after 50 years of these societies, and then you passed, you know, Parkside Funeral Home and others that are Jewish funeral homes downstate, they take you and they bury you, and, you know, they take care of the whole thing. I mean, so I'm just saying that for the audience. I don't know if you knew about that.
Yes.
But,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So you know about the Knights of Pythias. You want to become a member? No. So let me ask you about, all right, so we covered the Division of Cemeteries and what they do. Do you have anything to add of what the Division of Cemeteries
No,
does?
I think you've covered it well. I
Okay.
think, you know, one of the concerns that we have generally is just, you know, long-term preservation of cemeteries, and sometimes we wonder that all the tools aren't in the hands of the state that they need to make sure that these cemeteries are surviving in the long term.
All right, and the size of your association we covered, it's what, 600?
600.
Yeah, approximately 600. We're growing every day.
Every day. And what's your mission statement? Did you memorize it?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I didn't memorize it, but I
Okay.
can tell it to you for sure.
Because you
Uh,
printed it out?
Of course.
Okay.
I always come prepared.
Okay.
The goals in ISAC are to promote the advancement of practical knowledge and the operation and maintenance of cemeteries, to create and maintain high ethical standards and conduct of cemetery administration, and to secure the advantages to be obtained by mutual corporation.
Okay. And we talked about the fund for destroyed monuments, right?
Vandalism.
Vandalism.
For
Is
vandalism.
that, how bad is it? I mean, once we touched upon it. I mean, usually obviously at Halloween something is wrong, or usually when a Jewish cemetery gets headlines like we were just talking about the Jewish press, oh, here's a swastika, you know, on a tombstone, it's terrible, you know, it gets press. But I mean, sometimes these crimes are once a year and, you know, they make headlines, or is it prevalent? I mean,
There's a lot of, you're at the meetings with me too. I think there's not as many, I think, as there used to be. But in many instances, the cemeteries do not report the vandalism because they're afraid vandalism will beget more vandalism.
Well, that's interesting.
So they
And,
just clean it up themselves?
They clean it up themselves. Many of them, unfortunately, don't have the financial resources to do it, but they do what they can to do that so that it doesn't become a news story.
Is there harsh laws about it? I always think it's like a hate crime. Obviously, it's property and not people, but, you know.
There are a number of bills pending that would increase the penalties for acts of vandalism in a cemetery. Personally, I don't think it's strong enough, and I think that we should be going after folks.
Should it be a
long-term finance? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Long-term, sustainability of their salaries to help the cemetery.
Now, I have to tell you, well, in the Jewish religion, if you're a Kohen, you know what a Kohen is? Or it's a high priest, and they're not allowed to go on the cemeteries, and there's something of a special walkway. What if there's no trees? If there's no overhang from branches, you can walk through on the side, and there's certain rules and regulations.
Because they're holy people, like Mark over here is a
So
Kohen,
so
I
I have relatives buried at the old Montefiore Cemetery where the Lubavitcher Rebbe is buried, and I sent a friend in to take pictures of my family's gravestones. One of them was sort of tipped over, and the caretaker there just held it up with a stick, and I don't know what to do about it. Is there? You said that this fund is only for vandalism, but this isn't vandalism. This is just a stone that wasn't set right. So
well,
what happens when you find something like that?
The actual issue is that the cemetery doesn't obviously own the monument.
Right.
It is owned by the family, so the family is primarily responsible. If there's someone available who can afford to have the stone fixed, and if not, sometimes your homeowner's insurance, which people don't often know, sometimes your homeowner's insurance actually will cover monuments.
Wow.
And if the
aside from your own.
Yes, well, if it's a
family,
just
want to see if you're paying
family
attention.
monument, yeah, we're paying attention. If it's a family monument, sometimes homeowners does cover it, and we see that at cemetery board meetings. That the cemetery board encourages folks to check with their insurance company.
So I could have my homeowner's insurance cover the cost to repair this monument?
If it is covered, and if it's a family monument.
Okay.
That you'd have to check with your broker and find out whether or
You've done
not.
an insurance.
No, but I don't know if you've ever buried someone. I mean, a family member. So,
yes.
I mean, you may know this stuff just instinctively as opposed to policy and
It
being
depends.
official.
It just depends on the policy. I don't think I have one that actually covers it.
And just to add on that, that's really what our association is about, is assisting individuals and especially cemeteries, if there's anyone out there that isn't a member, to join, and we're always a resource.
You have to join, though, to get assistance.
We help anyone, no matter what,
okay.
but it would be really useful to them if they did join our association. David, Legislative Counsel, and some of our members write articles for our newsletters, which we distribute yearly.
Well, I went online. It's not that expensive to join.
No, it's not.
It's
very affordable.
You could be $40. Is that what I read?
As low as $12.
As low as
$12. 50
$12.
interments per year.
Okay. I just want to, now, what about above ground burials? Because I went to a cemetery, it sounds like I'm going to all these cemeteries, but it's like, I went to a cemetery in New Jersey, and they had this latest thing is above ground burials. It's a Jewish cemetery. Any thoughts on that? Is that happening more and more here in New York State, or are we running out of ground to bury people under?
Well, it's certainly for cemeteries. It's a good option in an area where the ground is not suitable for in-ground burial. Okay. But it's really goes with whatever the particular group that folks are catering to as far as who they bury in their cemetery as to whether or not that's acceptable to them. And obviously within the Jewish faith, there are differing opinions on what types of burials are appropriate. And I think New Jersey's a little different than New York, but certainly we have a whole wide range of options in New York.
And what's the difference between an above-ground burial and a mausoleum?
There isn't really a difference.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it'd be like a mausoleum. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
is it less money, would you say? I mean, why would a person want to?
Usually is more money.
Really?
to do above ground burial.
Even though you don't have to dig? Okay.
Well, there's a structure, so, and then
Okay.
the structure's got to be maintained, and you need to be able to,
But
you
the
know, have a
body,
trust.
the body decomposes the same way? I mean, is in a
I don't think you
mausoleum?
want me to go into the detail, but it is,
We are-
yes, it
you
is pretty much the same way.
Okay. Now, Rabbi Simon, do you, is there are you not allowed to have an above ground? Because
Well,
there's
yeah.
something about the body being part of the soil and part of the ground, like returning.
Well, this really, let's just go from the beginning. The real source is that Adam was created from dirt. Adam's name in Hebrew is Adam, ground is Adamah, so they say you're made from dirt, man's made out of dirt, and you go back to the dirt. So that's why I think that's why I'm saying cremation wouldn't be allowed under Orthodox Torah law. And again, above ground, you're not going into the dirt. So that idea of, and that's why also instead of metal is not going to decompose for
Right.
I don't know if ever, obviously a long time. And like you were saying, a pine box, you know, even obviously.
So
it's
according to
dirt and
Orthodox
water.
Jewish law, above ground burials are verboten.
Right, it should be underneath.
Okay,
No
there it
problem.
is, officially from the rabbi.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he says there's a lot of things that, you know, obviously other Jewish organizations do, but
Right, well,
doesn't mean doesn't.
you know,
hold
the
them.
Reform have
Yeah.
the above-ground burials. I don't know about conservative if they're, but, you know, it's a personal choice, I think, at some point.
Right.
You get two Jews, you get three opinions, you know, so.
I only get one burial, though.
That's right. one burial. So I wanted to ask you about salvaging cemeteries. Is there any way, I mean, there's this gentleman locally, Dr. Michael Lozman. You know him at all?
No.
He is going around Eastern Europe and Belarus and Lithuania, and he's restoring cemeteries that were lost to the Holocaust. And the fences are down, you can't even tell that it was a cemetery, the stones have been turned over, and he actually takes students on trips to Eastern Europe and to learn firsthand about the Holocaust and to restore these cemeteries. He's restored about 13 of them already. At his own expense, volunteer, no one's, you know, it's not a profit-making thing. Is there anything that you could do, or do you have any thoughts about this? That,
You know, get volunteers to look, hey, there's a
or
cemetery
you have
in
any
our
thoughts about
neighborhood.
maybe, you know, doing something that can assist him, or have can the Cemetery Association help in some way?
Well, I know, you know, locally in New York, certainly there are ways, there's actually a law that allows the State Division of Cemeteries to assist groups to restore cemeteries.
But in another country?
Not in another country, in the
That's-
state of New York. So if the question is for other countries,
Right.
no, but there are plenty of organizations that might be interested in helping.
Okay, that maybe you can help him.
Sure, you should
Absolutely.
absolutely have them reach out to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
let us know.
Do you have any thoughts about restoring cemeteries, and is that in terms of being, I mean, because he's saying when a stone falls over and actually the writing falls on the ground, when you upright it, it's actually more pristine
That's true.
than if it was weathered and open to the weather.
That's
and
true.
all
We're
that.
actually doing a cemetery restoration class for municipalities in June at the Great Sagamore Resort, one of the Vanderbilt old great camps in the Adirondacks. And we did it last year, calling in folks from all over, giving them the techniques on how to restore themselves with volunteer labor, how to restore gravestones, and how to restore cemeteries.
And that's when?
That's in June, I believe June 3rd. It's Great Camp Sagamore is the website, greatcampsagamore.org.
.org, okay. And where is the, and have you undertaken any restorations, or have you,
Yes.
tell us about that.
So we're doing, we actually do a Veterans Monument Restoration program in Rensselaer County, and I'm actually taking some students this weekend. We're actually doing some stones this weekend, getting their volunteer hours in.
Well, the Dr. Lozman says the most important thing is putting a fence around cemeteries.
Yes,
Is that true for non-Jewish cemeteries also?
absolutely. And the law allows you to apply for it, and if you're operating a cemetery, you're required to put a fence up.
Yeah, because that's what really makes it a boundary, you know,
Yes.
that's what, yeah. Anything else that you want to add that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Think about the association?
Yeah, I mean, just that a lot of people don't realize the importance of a cemetery to a community until usually they lose a loved one or pass by it. They're very beautiful, and they should be maintained, and they're an important part of the community. And that's what we encourage, and we are a resource to an everyday citizen or any cemeteries that may not know about the New York State Association of Cemeteries. And we're always there as a resource in any way possible. And you can go right on our website. It's www.nysac.com.
Nice sack.
Yep.
Well, you get it confused with the Association of Counties, I'm sure.
We have before.
But
We've
that's
gotten-
It boosts traffic, which is good.
They're nice enough to forward the mail over to us.
They're .org and you're .com.
Yes.
Yes.
So you got to it first,
We
I guess.
got there first.
You got there first. Okay.
Listen,
Well,
we're out
thank
of
you.
time, and Dave and Don, that is very important. Like I said, in Judaism, it's maybe a little bit, people don't say, oh, death and cemeteries and funerals, oh, I don't want to deal with it. But again, in Judaism, of course, it's
Hate to
very,
say,
very...
it's a fact of life.
yeah.
So,
But in case you're doing good work and
Yes.
helping out, and you know, it's all part of a human being. You know, like you said, life and death is part of it, and keeping the high standards of what a human being really is, even after they passed away. So thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
work.
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you
thank you for
very
your
much.
work. Thank you.